Hey guys, it's Doc from the Gold Hog, and today what I'm going to do is I'm doing our new video on making mats. And this is going to be pretty in-depth, but I'm going to break it up in parts so that you can skip through it and see what you need to understand. Let me grab my notes real quick so I don't forget. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a summary of the mats so you understand how this works. First, all of our mats, we have 5 different mats now. They come in strips that are 36 inches wide and 6 inches long, and a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think that it's 6 inches long or excuse me, 36 inches long and 6 inches wide. It's the opposite. It actually runs like this. So they're 36 inches wide and 6 inches long. And what you do is you cut these mats into strips. So if you have a 10-inch wide sluice, you would cut a 10-inch piece, a 10-inch piece, and a 10-inch piece, and then you would glue those mats together into a mat. And let me grab one. Okay, so let me grab this. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a 36-inch wide piece of mat. I'm going to cut it into strips. So I have strips. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these strips together and put tape on the back and tape on the sides. And what I'll end up with is I'll end up with a long sluice mat that the water runs over. So that's how the mats work, number one. Number two, the mats are designed, when I designed these mats, I designed them so that they would all work together. That's the whole point of this. So you can vary your matting surface all the way through your sluice system. So they all have a tongue and groove system. Let's see if I can show that to you. So they all have a tongue and groove system on it, and this is always the top, and we call it the duck head, and then we call this the duck butt. But this is actually the female, and this is actually the male. And the male end is always at the top of the mat. So when you're looking at your mats and you're going to install them, especially with the UR mat, because the UR mat you can put in your sluice backwards, you got to understand which is the top. It's very specific. So the top of the UR mat, or the top of the mat, is the male, and then you have that big gap down the bottom, which is the female. But the whole point to that is, of course, is that now you can take any of these mats and they'll all fit together in any arrangement that you want. So as you have different velocities and different speeds and different needs in your sluice, now you can change your matting all the way through. And you can also expose your slurry to all different kinds of velocities, capture zones, and different things. So I'm not going to go over the mats real quickly right now. I'm not going to go over all 5 of them. I'm going to do that a little bit later. But what I am going to do is I'm going to do a quick summary of the mats that I just did. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a quick how to cut and how to assemble the mats. I'm going to show you actually how to make the mats. Then I'm going to actually show you some little secret tips that we've developed over the year. Little nuances about the mats, because each one of these has their own little personality, we'll call it. So we're going to show you how to work with some of those little details. Then I'm going to talk real quickly about attaching the mats inside of a sluice. Then I'm going to talk to you real quickly about which mats are best to use where in a sluice and for what configuration. Then I'm going to talk about cleaning the mats, and I'm going to throw a couple of things in. Now, before I get started, one thing I do want to point out is if you go to our website, goldhog.com, you're going to find up in one of the corners up there, you're going to see a free prospecting book. It really is more of a science book, sort of inside my mind and what I was thinking about when all this equipment and matting was developed, and the fact that what we really want to do is, people think about the number one mistake that people make when they're running our mats. The mistake that they make is they run them too slow. And I'm going to say this before we get started. Understand this point. You want to run these mats after you get them installed. You want to run these mats so fast and so steep that you completely blow them out. And what you're going to understand when you do that, it's hard to do that, number one, but you're going to see gold in that. You're going to be running them so fast, and you're going to see even fine gold in the mats. Then what you're going to do is you're going to gently decrease the pitch a little bit, still have the mats just holding a little bit of material, and what you're going to find is that that little bit of material is the heaviest material. And what's the heaviest? The heaviest is gold. Gold has a specific density of 19, lead is 11, pyrite might be 6 or 5. So you've got to understand, we want to keep these mats extremely active. Much more active than you think. And anytime someone has said, well, I tried this mat, I tried those mats, but I had losses, they ran it too slow. Or they didn't have a correct configuration in it. So I'm going to address that too. Okay, so we have 5 mats. We have a UR, we have scrubber, we have the river hog, we have razorback, and we have bedrock. Each one of them serves a little bit different purpose, and I'll go over that a little bit later. But right now, I'm just going to use one. I'm going to use the UR mat because it's real easy to work with. And I'm going to show you how we do it. And I'm going to show you in this little camera up close. So I'm going to move this big stack of mats out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the mat. So when we cut the mat, one thing that we do is we always use, when we cut the mat, I always want to use this male edge because the male edge actually is a little bit flatter on this front side. I don't want to use the female edge when I'm lining it up. Now the next thing you need to understand is that this is an extruded rubber product, which means that it's never going to be perfectly square. It's just like a 2x4. If you go buy a 2x4 and you put it on the ground, it's never perfectly flat. There's always a little bit of variance to it. Same thing with this, and that's why when commercial ops, we work with commercial ops, if they're designing a sluice system, we say don't go wider than 18 for 2 reasons. Huge mats are hard to work with because of that. But number 2, if you created 18, what's half of 36? So if you go right down the middle here, you're going to have no waste, almost no waste. Now I will say that the majority of our mats come in a little bit longer than 36. So even if you order them, even if you cut them 18, you'll still have a little bit of waste on there to square it up, a little bit of room. So you've got your mat, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to measure your sluice before you cut. Let me show you what I'm talking about there. I'm just going to grab, I don't even have a sluice here. I'm actually out working in my shop and I don't even have a sluice here. I have an old piece of test equipment. So good luck figuring out what this is. So here's an old little piece of test equipment that we have. This was part of a multi-stage system that we designed for testing. But what I'm going to do is a couple things you're going to need, and number 1 is going to be a good tape measure and a one that's easy to read with 1/4 and 1/8 on it. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to go inside to the very bottom where I'm going to start my mat, or if I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to measure, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to look where that tape measure is actually going to fall. So where is this tape measure actually going to fall here? And when I look at it, this is a 10-inch sluice, but guess what? It really is about 9 to the sidewall, 9 7/8, okay? So it's 9 7/8 down to that wall. Let me do it this way so you can see that. So I put it inside here, and when I come down, if this tape were to fall flat, it would be right about 9 7/8. So here's what I'm going to do. Step number 1, you always square up your mat. So what I'm going to do, the next tool you're going to need is you're going to need a good square, and you're going to need a good blade. Now I like the snap blades, and the snap blades you can just, because we use a lot of the point for cutting. We don't necessarily use the blade. We use a lot of this point for cutting. So I always want a sharp point on my blade, and I want a good square. This is the type of square that we use, and we actually use this in our shop. So I'm going to take my mat, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square it up. So I've got my male end here, the top of the mat, and even if it's a 1/16 of an inch or 32nd, I'm always going to square up this mat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to score very lightly. I'm not pushing down, I'm just letting this mat go like this. Now, the one tip I am going to show you right now is when I get down to this little female end down here, I'm not pulling, I'm going to stop right there. Because when I do that, if I have this knife, if I pull, I'm creating tension, I'm pulling that rubber, and so I can actually, at the very end of it, I can actually give a little bit of a fishtail. So right when I get to the end, I stop. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut straight down on it. So now I'm just squaring this up. Now I'm going to show you a little trick, because I got to do it anyway, so I might as well show you. One of my tools, this is a 2x6, and I like to have a 2x6 because the mats are 6 inches wide. And what I can do now is I can hang this just off the end here. Okay, I'm hanging it just off the end, and now I can sort of push here and open up this mat. And that's the key to it, is you don't want resistance on your blade. So I'm just going to go like this. I'm just going to open it up and push down a little bit, and I'm just going to let that blade run down that groove. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not pushing down. I'm just letting it fall down that groove. again, just let the blade cut, don't force it. And now when I get down to this little side here, when I get down to this little end here, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to push straight down. I'm not going to pull. And that'll give me a nice square edge here versus a fishtail out. So now I have a square end. So now that I have a square end, and this is the next tool you might want to get, you can either get a white Sharpie or a silver Sharpie. We get these Sharpies at Lowe's and Home Depots, or you can get them on Amazon. But they're silver Sharpies, and they're the best thing that you can get for these mats. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up, and I'm going to come up here, and because my mat is because my sluice is 9 7/8, I'm going to measure it 1/8 of an inch shy of that. So if I have 9 7/8, I'm going to go to 9 7/8, and I'm going to go 1/8 minus, and make a teeny little dot. So again, now I'm going to go to the center, and again, I'm going to go 9 7/8 minus 1/8 and make a dot. I'm going to come down to the very far end, 9 7/8 minus 1/8, and make a little teeny dot. Now, it's important, and it's funny because in the shop, we always fight over the sharp Sharpies. We always want just a little teeny dot there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I have 3 dots here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this over the dots, and I'm going to cut the dots. I'm not going to cut behind them or in front of them. I'm going to actually cut the dots. So I'm just going to give a nice gentle score with the point. I'm not using the blade, I'm just using the point. Come down and I stop right before the end. I come down and I stop right before the end. So I've just scored it, that's all I've done. Now, you can use anything you want. We use a wooden dowel, but you can even put a Sharpie under it. But all I'm going to do is, I don't want resistance on that blade. So I don't want to keep pushing that blade through the mat. So I'm just going to put a dowel under here. And then you'll see what happens is the mat actually opens up. It actually kind of spreads in here. So I actually have a little gap in here, a little spread gap. And that allows the knife just to fall in. I want to do this so you can see this. And I'm just going to go down and just let the knife fall. I'm not pushing, I'm just letting the knife do the work. And then when I get down to this end, again, when I get down to this female end, all I'm going to do is I'm going to push straight down. And I'm just going to cut that female end. So now I've released that female end. I'm not going to distort it. And I can just go through here. And now I have a mat. Now I have a mat that's 1/8 inch shy of my sluice. So when I put this in to my sluice, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so here's what it looks like. So now I've got my mat in there, and it's 9 7/8, okay? So I've got just a little play in there, and that's all I want to see. I want to see just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of play in here. Because all I really want to do is, I just want to leave enough room for side tape. Matter of fact, if you want, you can even do your first mat, cut it 1/16 of an inch narrower. We're making our mats tighter and tighter and tighter in these things. All right, so when we install these mats, we're actually going to put side tape on them. So here's a little trick for you. I get yelled at because I bite my tape. Now this is Gorilla tape, and it's the only tape we use. It's this black Gorilla tape. You can get it on Amazon, get it at Home Depot. So what I'm going to do now is we use a side tape, and I'll explain this a little bit better later, but we're going to take the side tape and I'm going to stick it upside down on the mat, and then I'm going to fold it over on itself. Okay, so now I've got that little action right there. And let me show you this again on this side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take sticky side up, just like this. It's hard to do. We normally don't do it this way, but I'm going to put it just a little bit onto the mat, and then I'm going to fold the tape up on itself, down right next to the mat. Not too close. You don't have to be perfect with it. But now what I've got is I've got my test tabs. I call these test tabs, and we have these actually over at the shop. So when we put a mat into the sluice, we can see, and we can put it in there and say, is that tight enough or is it too loose? So now, even if one of my mats is a little bit too loose, I can adjust that. I can say, hey, I want to do it so when I put this in there, I have no movement back and forth, and it actually seats in there a little bit tight. This one, maybe even a little bit loose. So I really should have started this one off by cutting it maybe a 1/16 of an inch narrower. But I really want that mat to sit in there tight. So now we're going to do the same thing for each one of our sluice. We're going to take our measurement. We're not going to assume the sluice is the same because they're often different. I'm going to take a measurement, I'm going to cut my mat, and then I'm going to put it in. I'm going to put my side tape on and I'm going to test it. So I'm going to put it in here. Yep, nice and tight, good fit, no wiggle room in there. And again, you can add a 1/16 if you want, because you can go back and cut these mats very, very gently and trim it off. And then I'm going to cut the next one, make sure it fits. Do not, and I repeat, do not measure once and then cut all your mats, because it's not going to work. Sluices are never perfect all the way down. So you just make mat after mat, put your little test tape on there, your little side tape, and put it on there. So I'm going to cut another one that's 9 3/4. But what's the first thing I do? Do you remember? The first thing I do is I square up the mat. Every single cut, and trust me, once you start working with it, you'll understand that you always, no matter what, you always go back and square it up. Even if it's a 1/16 of an inch off, you're going to square it up. So I'm going to square this mat up, and if I put it right over the edge, I can see that it's about a 1/16 of an inch off. So what I'm going to do is guess what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave a little square, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to score it right down, score it right down. I'm going to cut off straight down on here where it's opened up. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to push down on this section here. And I'm just going to let the knife fall inside of it, and I'm just going to cut it. Just going to trim it. Again, be very, very careful. This is when you can cut yourself. And one thing that we stress over at the shop is you be very, very careful when you're using this mats, when you're using these knives. So I've squared up that end. I know my mat needs to be 9 3/4. So again, let me show it again. And I'm going to measure. And I'm going to make a tiny little dot. 9 3/4. 9 3/4. And 9 3/4. Now you can even, sometimes if you cut your first mat and say, little too loose, little too tight, you can cut left or right of the dot too, of the dots. Now remember, here's an important point. What am I not using on this? I am not using this side. So I am lining up these dots, and I now rely on the dots. And here's why. This side of the mat and this side of the mat need to be parallel. I don't care about the top. Once I've squared up one side, I forget about being square on the other side. And what I want is I want that left side parallel to that right side. Most important point probably in everything I'm doing here is to understand that point. Use the square to square up your first end, then you do not use the square part. You actually just connect the dots. So let me stress that again. So I'm going to actually cut the dots. And I'm just going to make one good score down it and stop. I'm going to take my little dowel and I'm going to open this up. Okay, so now I've opened it up and I've got a gap in here. So now that this allows for a gap, I can just let my blade come in here, and the blade will just fall in there with no resistance. It's hard to do it like this, but. So I'm just allowing this to come in, and I'm just letting the knife do the work. And I'm going to stop. I'm not cutting this female end. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to push straight down on that female end. Push straight down and release it. And now my mat is released. Now my mat is cut. So again, I would take this. I would put my testing tape on it. I'm going to put my test tape on it. Again, I'm going to put the test tape on one side. I'm going to put the test tape on the other side. And now I can test it in my sluice, or whatever you want to call this thing. So now I can take this thing and I can go up in here put it inside and make sure that I've got a nice tight fit. Again, I would like it a little bit tighter than this fit, but I'm just doing this for as an example. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue up the mats. So when I glue up my mats, now there's two types of glues that we use. What's funny is I stopped personally, and we stopped over at the shop. We always use Gorilla Glue. So we always use Gorilla Super Glue. Let me get that straight. It's Gorilla Super Glue. You do not use regular Gorilla Glue. Regular Gorilla Glue will not work. We use Super Glue. That's what we use. But the thing about this Gorilla Super Glue, it's a little bit thicker than your average super glue. It's not liquid, it's just above the gel stage. It's a slower liquid. And it has about a 7-second drying time or adhesion time. You have about 7 seconds to work with it. Now, this is what we're starting to use, which is Loctite. Now this is the Loctite. It's a long neck bottle, number one, so it's easy to work with the mats. And number two, it's a liquid. You do not want the gel. This is a liquid. Now I'm going to warn you, if you use this Loctite has a drying or cure time of 3 to 5 seconds. So I'm going to show you how to use this. But we really like this because it's liquid, it goes right into the cracks, seals them up nicely. Again, Amazon, Lowe's, Home Depot, but you can see that it has a real nice little long net tip on it. And it's real easy to work with these mats. Okay, now here's one of the changes that we've made in making our mats. All right, so here's the top of each mat, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these mats together. And some mats go together easier than the others. I'll warn you. As an example, the Razorback mat, if you're working with Razorback mat, it can be a bear because it's so thick and you really have to work with that mat. So I'm going in and I'm putting these two mats together. So here's one of my tricks or tips. The most important part about this mat after you get it done, I think, is to make sure that your alignment on both sides is good. If by some chance one mat is a 1/16 of an inch wider than the other one, split the difference. Don't put it off to one side. Get these mats even alignment, okay? And that's why that little fish hook at the bottom is important not to worry about or not to try and get. So I've got these mats even down here, and I've got the mats sitting perfectly together. So let me show you what I do now. So now I'm going to take my Loctite bottle, and all I'm going to do, get super glue everywhere. I'm just going to keep the cap off. I'm going to use my square again. This is where I bring my square into play. But all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up one little thing, come in here, and just put a drop or two. Okay, so I put a drop or two in. Now I'm going to take my square and just push down. And we like to lift the mat up. And I'm going to count to 5. So right about now is 5. So now that I've done that, I've actually secured the center of the mat. But what else have I done? Well, because I made this alignment perfect and I just did that one side, I don't have to worry about putting these mats together lined up. They're already lined up and I'm securing it. So now what I've done is I've secured this center part. Now I'm going to go back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to secure this side and this side separately. That makes a huge difference from the old way we used to do it. Now I don't have to worry about the mats slipping or getting out of alignment, or if I'm putting together, especially on big mats, if I'm putting them together, I don't have to worry about, oh, I didn't get it in right. This is a nice, comfortable way to do this. Next warning is don't forget, why was superglue invented? Superglue was invented to bond tissue, mainly in transplant patients or graft patients. So if you get superglue in your finger and get superglue in your mat, you're going to have a mat. You're going to have to decide which one you want to cut. Do you want to cut your finger or do you want to cut the mat? Be careful. So what I'm going to do is, and I always have a paper towel with me, which I don't have right now. All right, so I like to have a spoon around. Don't tell my wife. She wonders where this thing went. But what I do with the spoon is I actually stick it in between the mats here, and I just sort of run it up just to sort of loosen up that edge. And that gives me a place to grip a little bit. I flare it up a little bit. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the bottle inside here. I'm not going to squeeze it because it's going to come out pretty quick. And I'm just going to get a couple drops. I'm just going to get a little bit of glue in here all the way down. And now I'm going to take, and I'm actually going to lift my mat. I'm going to push in and lift up. Now the other thing I can do is I can just get right behind that line and go to about a 5-second count. Okay, so now this side of the mat is secure. So now I'm not going to get this mat apart, period. Same thing, now I'm going to do this other side. So I'm going to lift my spoon in. And the reason why I do the spoon trick, it just makes it easier to grab that little lip. It just gives you a little place to grab here. So again, the same thing. I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to raise this up a little bit. And I'm going to go to where it stops. And I'm just going to run this down just like that. Now I did that one a little bit heavy. Again, I'm just going to put my thing on here, lift it up and in, count to 5, and my mat is permanently glued. So if I have any super glue on here, just a quick little wipe, it'll dry. If you want to take that off, acetone takes it off. Fingernail polish remover, which is basically acetone, that's the only thing that'll undo super glue. So now my mat is basically permanently bonded at this point. I can hang from this from a ceiling. Now I'm going to show you what we do to the bottom of the mats, and this is also kind of new. Normally we would just tape the mats, but I'm going to show you what we started doing on a permanent connection. So I'll need my Gorilla Tape and I'll need my glue. So you can see now that on this mat, mine's dirty, but when I raise it up, I get a little bit of a gap in here, okay? So again, if it's flat, there's no gap. When I raise it up, I'm going to get a little bit of a gap. And all I'm going to do with this Loctite glue, or regular super glue, the Loctite, because it's a liquid, falls in quicker, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put a full line of glue right on that. Full line all the way down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close it up. So I'm just closing it up and I'm going to count to about 5, and they'll have a nice strong bond there. And again, if I want to make sure, I can just sort of just push there and close it up. But now I've got a nice bond there. Now, you'll notice that I've got super glue. I've still got super glue on here. So what I'm going to do now, we do this anyways, is I'm going to take a piece of tape. I'm going to take a piece of tape without touching my super glue so I don't stick. I'm going to put it in the middle. I'm going to put that tape here. And then I'm going to run it down and just leave it. So I'm going to leave the extra super glue on that underneath it. I'm not going to clean it up. It'll create a nice bond with that tape. And now I'm just going to trim this tape off. So I'm just going to go down the side here. I'm trying to do this so you can see this. I just trimmed that piece of tape off, and the other side as well, which I should have done right the first time. Because now it's getting a little dangerous. Okay, so there's my mat. So now I've got this side is bonded, which is the top, and now I've got the tape side underneath with it, which is bonded. And now I've got a mat that I cannot pull apart. I mean, I can literally tow a vehicle with this. Now, one thing I did want to mention real quick on the mats, a lot of people ask if there's some kind of like white dust or looks like a resin or something. It's actually a saline bath or a salt bath when these mats are cooling. And you just take soap and water and clean your mats. That's all you got to do. Matter of fact, if you're making real big mats, sometimes we actually go in and we clean our mats before we glue them. It really doesn't bother it. We never, but if we're doing real big mats, sometimes we'll do it. It's just a little bit of saline solution or salt water. All right, so there's my mat. And let's pretend that this is a nice long 10 for a 10 by 36 or 10 by 48 sluice, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make my side tape. I'm gonna use my 2x6 here. But what I'm doing, all I'm doing is I'm coming up under this and I'm just putting about a 1/2 inch of this tape underneath the mat. Okay, so now I've got about a 1/2 inch on that mat, and now I'm just going to fold this tape over on itself right next to the mat. So I'm going to fold it right over itself, and I'm doing this sloppy because I'm upside down and backwards. Okay, so now there's my side tape. See if you can understand what I just did. So I put some of the tape upside down on the back. Here's the front, and now I want you to see what happens. That this tape, when you put it into your sluice, it seals up the sides. So when you come up, it completely seals up the side, and your mat will be nice and tight, and you'll have a guard against any side losses on there. So that's your side tape. Now you're going to put side tape on this side tape on this side. I even like to put a little bit of side tape up on the top when I secure it into my sluice. Now I've got my mat ready. I'll put side tape on the other side. Matter of fact, I think I'll probably go ahead and do it again so you can see it this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I do this way. It's kind of tough. Bear with me. This stuff is really sticky. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and about a 1/2 inch of the mat, and I'm going to put it on there. So now I've got it facing upward, sticky side up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the end of this. Actually, let me do it from down here. I'm going to take the end of this tape and I'm going to fold it back on itself. Real close, but not way up close. Same thing. And now I'm just going to go walk it down, do my side tape, walk it down, and I can even pull over here and then just sort of just walk it down like this. And so now, when I do this, when I close this up, now it seals up the sides of the mats. It's nice and tight in there. Nothing's getting out of there. So that's what it looks like. So you can understand this is the sticky side, it folds up. So you'll notice that we're not doing the actual top tape anymore. What we're doing is we're actually securing these. Now, if you want to do a test on this, let's say you're not sure of the configuration or sure of how the mats are going to do this. All you have to do is skip the glue. And what I'm going to show you is put your mats together. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 1/2 a piece of this tape, rip it, and it rips right in half. And what I'm going to do is instead of gluing this, let's start with this. Instead of gluing it, I'm just going to put a piece of tape across here, and then a piece of tape across the back and the side tape. And now I have a mat that will stay together okay. It'll at least let me test my sluice without gluing the mat. So now I can go out, make my whole mat, and I can run my sluice and watch it and see if I need to change my mat configuration. Maybe something's not working over here. There's not enough speed for this mat, so I want to shift it around. Or maybe I actually want to test it and see which works best for my sluice. So you can just tape it. Now you're going to have to be a little bit gentle because it's going to come apart if you pull it, or if you're going to try and clean it out, it may come apart. There's another way to do this. And the other way to do this is what's called the one-drop method. The one-drop method, which is a little more dangerous, is literally 1 drop of superglue. You can put 1 drop of superglue right here and then put your top tape and put your back tape. Now that'll hold it a little bit better. But what you're able to do is you're able to go in there and take a Q-tip and work it with acetone. And when you work with acetone, you can actually get that super glue to release, and you may end up having to pull and sort of rip the mats a little bit. But I mean, you won't destroy the mats, but you have to sort of tear them apart and work with that acetone. That's a little bit more risky. Personally, I'd like to see you tape them if you want to test it first. But this is the permanent mat. Now we've had mats like this out in the field in commercial operations for almost 1.5 years. And the first op that puts them in, they'll leave them out there in the baking sun during the summer. They just leave them out there. And they've had the same mats for almost 1.5 years now. They were one of the first ops to run it. They've got the same UR mat we ever put in there. And sometimes they'll run and they'll get busy and they won't even clean out the sluice. They won't even clean out their system for 2 or 3 days and just leave all the gold and everything and then come back and wash it out. The only thing they've ever had to do, they say that once in a while we come back and we might touch up a little glue or fix a little tape, and that's it. It's amazing how durable this is. And don't forget, this is EPDM rubber. This is the same stuff that they put on roofs that has a 10-20 year life. So this stuff just lasts forever. All right, so real quick, I'm going to show you a little bit about the personality of these mats and cutting of different mats. And I'm going to show you how to trim a river hog real quick too. So the first thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the scrubber mat. All right, so here's the scrubber mat, and you can see from the scrubber mat the face is a lot different, and you're gonna have to play a little bit. Let me show you the best way to cut this. So I'm gonna have a 2x4 and I have a 2x6. And what I'm gonna do with this is I'm actually, when I turn the mat over to cut it, I'm gonna put it in this camera here so you can see it. But when I put it, you'll notice that what I do is I put this ridge right here. I want to put this ridge in between the boards. And I'm going to play with it a little bit until I get it sort of flat in there. So now I've got it sort of reasonable. Now the other thing we do, a couple of the guys actually like to take, you know, they'll even do an adjustment, and they'll take like a strip of metal and they'll put a metal in here and they'll flatten this and get it nice and sturdy. So now they've got a nice edge to cut this. So they're going to come in, they're going to square this up, they're going to measure, they're going to cross it off, and I'm just going to cut a strip. I'm not even going to really square it up. But again, they're going to score it, and then once they score it, when you open it, again, when you bend this, you can see I haven't cut it, but that score will open up. And when you open up that score, you can get that knife in there real easy. So the same thing. Carefully now, because this is going to be a little unstable. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that score. This opens up the score, and I'm just going to let the knife fall and let the knife fall and let the knife fall. But remember, when you cut your scrubber, what do you have on the scrubber? You have a large riffle down there. So you just got to take your time a little bit, okay? Take your time a little bit with that one tall scrubber, and just let your knife just do the work. Let your knife do the work. Sometimes I even take that out of there. I'm not pushing, I'm just letting the blade sort of cut down. The blade, I'm just letting it just sort of just pop along, pop along, pop along, pop along. Okay, so now I cut through that big riffle on the scrubber. But one thing I did want to show you is that sometimes when you cut the riffle on this, sometimes this riffle might have a little bit of a bow out on it. But that's fine, it's not going to hurt anything. And so what I do is I come in from the back side on the scrubber. See if I can get this. But I come in on the back side and I'll take a 1/16 of an inch right along here. Because what's going to happen, if I take this scrubber mat and I put it up against the bottom, well, this whole mat is square, but if this large riffle is sticking out farther, then I'm just going to take it and bring it in a little bit and sort of angle it inward. Doesn't have any impact on recovery rate, but that's nice because then it doesn't that doesn't push up against the side of the sluice. Now when I cut my river hog, let me grab that mat. This is the river hog, and if I'm going to use a river hog, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use my 2x6s, and I'm putting this riffle here, I'm putting that riffle in between the two, in the 2x4 and the 2x6. Now I've got a solid surface here. It's flat because it's in between those, okay? So what I'm going to do is I've squared this up. Now I'm going to make my cut, but I'm going to cut this one a little bit longer so I can show you a trick. Again, really just a score. You can even, if you want, instead of putting the round dowel under there, you can move your 2x4s down, the 2x4 and the 2x6, and have it fall. Again, all I'm trying to do is just get that line just to open up a little bit. So I'm going to get that line to open up a little bit so that the knife can just go in there nice and easy. And I'm not pushing down, I'm just letting the knife do the work. Now again, the river hog has a large riffle on it, okay? And what I like to do, I'll show you the way that I like to do it. I have the majority of this mat cut, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to line this up, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to cut right down to that line. And now I have my river hog that's been cut, okay? So this is my river hog that's been cut. A lot of times you're going to want to trim the riffle on the river hog. This is designed for deep water. This is for large dredges. That's why we made the riffle large. It's for large commercial, deep water commercial. It's a flow interruption mat versus more of an exchange and finishing mat. And this took a long time to develop. We thought about this and thought about this. But I want you to look at this. Now this is 1/2 by 3/4 aluminum, okay? 1/2 by 3/4 aluminum. And it costs you maybe about $3. You can pick up a piece of this somewhere. You can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot, but it's just aluminum angled. And here's what we found. If we put this right inside, right in front of the riffle on the front, it gives us almost the perfect trim height that everyone needs to trim it. If you're using it in a regular high banker or a dredge that's not as powerful as deep. So again, I'm just going to rest that, if I can get this. So all I'm doing is I'm putting this inside the riffle. So here's the riffle. Right before the riffle there's a pre-ramp, and I'm going to put it like this, okay? And now, one nice thing about it is look where my fingers are. They're protected. This little ridge gives me a protection point, so I can push against the riffle. And what I'm going to do, see, hopefully you can see this, is I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to score a line. Nice firm one score all the way across that, okay? So now I've made one good score in there. And the nice thing is now it's opened up. So now it's opened up and I can go back in and I can sort of walk this down. All I care about is that first cut. That's the one that's got to be, I want that first cut good. Now I can go in here, stick the knife behind it, and I can start to trim it down. Now, you can also go back in if you want. And let's say, well, I want to get more line in there. I want to try and cut it all the way. You can. There are a couple guys at the shop that actually get this stuff and cut it all the way through the first time. And you can see that I'm going all the way through it. And so now I've cut, and now I've trimmed that little ramp. I've trimmed it off. Now, I may not be perfect here and it may not be perfect here. Don't worry about it. The main thing is you just want a nice straight line across. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's an easy way to cut the river hog. Again, all I'm doing is I'm taking this little angle iron and I'm putting it inside there and I'm cutting it. Because I really want my cut to be on a downward, I want my cut to be on a downward angle, and you'll see what happens when I rest it up against there. When I rest it up against there, I get a nice little downward angle. So you can see what happens there? So now I've got a nice little cut there. And it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's a trimmed river hog. Okay? This is, and let's compare it. Let's compare the two. You can see, okay? There's your full river hog. There's a trimmed river hog. So you can see the two of them. So if you don't have a real deep water sluice, like most of us don't, you can do this. Now, and I actually run, in our monster hog, we run a trim, a full, and then a trim again. But it's a flow interruption system, and it'll slow down the speed, and you need to learn about the river hog. Okay, let's talk about making big mats. We have a lot of commercial operations now that are starting to use our mats, and what I want to do is, I think I'm going to show you the new Bedrock. This is the new Bedrock mat, and the Bedrock mat is a really neat. It's sort of a drop ramp. I don't want to say a drop riffle. It's more of a drop ramp design, but it's kind of on the line of a drop riffle. But it's a drop ramp that also incorporates a cleaning vortex. And this is a real high-speed mat. I'm going to warn you. It really likes water speed. We've tried it in commercial ops with real good success. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about making large mats. All right, so just for giggles, let's say that this mat is 36 inches wide. I'm a commercial operation. I'm going to cut it in half. Really, this mat is about 37, so I'm going to cut it. It's 37 and a half actually, so I'm going to cut it 18 and a half about. So again, I'm going to cut it 18 and a half. Now, just because you're making a big mat, nothing changes. Remember that, nothing changes. You still square, do 3 measures and cut. Put 1 slot in. You want to put every single mat, like when we make our monster hogs, we cut a mat, we put it into the sluice. We cut a mat, we put it into the sluice. We test, and we're now getting more and more tight on these fittings. So now I'm going to cut this mat. This one's actually pretty easy to cut. I'm cheating here for time purposes. For time's sake, I'm cheating. Okay, so now I want you to see I've got two. This is a commercial grade mat, so this is over 18 inches wide. Now, when I start to deal with over 18 inches wide, what do we know about the mats? Well, we know that they're not perfectly square. There's a little bit of a bow sometimes to them. So here's what you want to do. You want to work these mats together real tight, okay? You want to get them in there fitting really nice and tight. If you have any problems, especially on your bigger mat, fronting tight, take a spoon or a little tool and go up in here and raise this lip across. Again, just raise that lip across. Give yourself a little more play in there. Then you can come in and you'll find, wow, the mat fits a little bit better. When together, they go in much easier that way, and I'm going to line these up. And again, the important thing about making commercial mats is you're going to want these edges to line up evenly here. So you want to get these aligned. Then the next thing I'm going to do is, just like I did before, I'm going to go in and I'm going to get the center. So I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to go into the center. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue right there. Same thing. I'm going to take this little tool, put it here, lift up. As you can see, I lift and push in and I hold for 5 seconds. So I'm just going to hold it for 5 seconds and then I'm done. Now that little section is secure. Again, since I've already gone in here and I'm going to run this little lip, we just like to do this. It just makes it easier. It just gives you a place to sort of lift up. Now I'm going to get this mat together. And now here's one of the tricks that we like on the bigger mats. As you notice, I'm taking this point and I'm going inward like this. So I'm going to go inward and then I'm going to roll the line down to here. I'm not going to try and go this way because it's harder. So I'm just going to stick the little nozzle in. And now that the lip is up, it's not making contact, so I don't have to freak out. And I'm just going to get a nice little bead down here. Same thing, I'm going to have this tool ready, and now I'm going to bend it up and just give it a little push. And I'm going to hold for about 5 seconds. After the 5 seconds, my mat is secure. It's that quick. So this type of glue, and this is why we use this. Now here's what I want you to see. This is all nice and neat, but you're going to see a little bit of separation here. So now I can say, oh, okay, well this side is nice and tight, but this side is a little separated. So that's why on these big mats you do one side at a time. So now I'm going to turn it, and now I'm going to do the other side. So now all I have to do is just come back in here, play with it a little bit and get it nice and tight. Same thing. I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to raise, again, we like to raise this lip up some so we have an easier grip on it. Come back in all the way to here, and I like to flare up that a little bit. Get the mats together. Come in, stick my bottle in there, and just run a little line. Get my tool. Bring my mats in together, lift it up, push in, push down right on that line, just like that. And now I'm going to hold for 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, boom. And now this side is complete. Now I'm not really going to mess with this at all. I can go back and maybe on my corners here, you can see maybe I'll have a little separation on my corners. So now I can go back through here and touch it up if I want. Be careful, this is where your fingers always get stuck. But I can go back in here and now I can do a little touch up on this side and just push it and hold it. And now that's good. Check this corner over here, that's good. So now I have a commercial width mat that's 18 inches wide and it's ready to go. So now I've got the top glued. So the same thing as I did with the other mat, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to bend it up. And when I bend it up, what happens? Well, this back seam opens up. So now I've got this back seam opened up, so now I'm just going to run a full bead all the way down it. I'm going to fill up that gap all the way down, open this up here, keep it open. Same thing, now I'm just going to bring these back down together. And I'm just going to bow this up and let it connect, hold it for 5 seconds. And then sometimes we even take a board, we'll even take a board and keep this side up like this as a little trick, just to keep it together. And then we'll take our tape, put it here, come down with it, push it down. There's our tape. Then we'll take our blade and we'll trim it right along here. And so now that mat will never come apart. Like I said, you can tow a car with it. So again, understand the concept of what I'm doing here is I'm taking one of the mats and I'm attaching it in the center, getting it perfectly aligned on the sides, and be careful of that super glue. Getting it perfectly aligned on the sides, securing it in the center. Once I secure it in the center, it's not going to move left and right. I can also manipulate it from side to side. So I've secured the center, I'm going to work on one side. Get that side done, go to the other side, work on that other side. But this also works on the smaller mats too. Now I'm going to make these probably 4 or 5 long, like this. And then I'm going to go to the next section, 4 or 5 long. Then I'm going to attach these one by one and go back in here. So that's an important step. Okay, so one thing I didn't talk about that I want to talk about real quick is when you go in, you're cutting your mats for your sluice, what we always do, and especially with our real long mats, when we're talking about like the Monster Hog, and we have a longer mat, but this is true for all of them, you might get confused. And what we do is we put one in, we get all the mats cut and we put them in the sluice, and before we take them out again, we actually number them. So we take our silver Sharpie and we go mat number 1, mat number 2, and if you buy one of our gold Monster Hogs, when you actually open your mat for the first time, you're going to see number 1 through 18 or 19, I can't remember which it is, but you're going to see all those mats with little numbers on them all the way down. And that's so that we don't forget the sequence of where those go. Because the Monster Hog, it flares out slightly as it goes down, so it has to be, it's exactly in there just right. So number your mats too. And again, that's helpful too. If you're just going to tape them together temporarily just to test it, or do a 1-drop method, now you know where they were in sequence if they come apart. So now I say, okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, let's talk about how do we attach the mats. This is always a question. Now, I'm not going to talk about a stream sluice because a stream sluice is a lot different. And if you go to our forum, we have some information on that. People have posted different methods. But really, what I'm going to show you is what we do is we just take a piece of angle iron like this. And what we'll do is we'll drill a hole here and drill a hole here. We'll cut this. And what we'll do is we'll also cut holes in our mat here. And we'll take this angle iron and we'll secure it like this, and we'll just, with wing nuts and bolts, and just bolt down the top. So at the top of the sluice, we actually drill 2 holes through it, use the angle iron on top of the mat, and now we have a good way to secure it down. Now we use equal. We use a 1x1 or 1 1/4 or 1 1/2 angle iron. That's what we like to attach it with. You can just use a regular strip if you want. We like the angle iron, and sometimes we even bend this angle back a little bit. So we drill 2 holes through here, we cut 2 holes in our mat, we put it on and we secure it down, and the mat is good. You just undo the wing nuts, pull it out, and your mat is loose. Now, real quickly, I just want to talk about, we show this all over, but a lot of people don't understand, how do I clean my mats? So I'm going to show you something real quick. Okay, so here's the mat. Well, when you clean this mat, what you want to do is something we call reverse roll. So what you're going to do is when you roll it, you reverse roll it, and what happens is these grooves open up. So these grooves actually go from here to here. They open up, and then we just wash the mat in and out. We just dip it in and out of a tub. We roll the whole mat, reverse roll it, put it in the tub, rinse it, and it's done. Now the toughest one to do that on is is the Razorback. The Razorback is real thick and tough because it's a fine face on it and it doesn't like to reverse roll. So you really got to battle that mat to clean it. But all the other ones, the Bedrock is real soft. You can see the Bedrock when I roll it. I just reverse roll it. I put it in the water, let it run out, put it in the water, let it run out, and it cleans out. This is the easiest one to clean. This, as long as you get it tight, and we'll reverse roll it one way, and then we'll reverse roll it the other way, wash it and clean it, put it back in, we're ready to roll. Remember, if your gold's stuck in here, it's not going anywhere, you're taking it home, so you'll get it later. Okay, so you have to excuse all my junk here, but real quickly I wanted to talk about what mats to use where. That's always a question to come up, and I'm going to cover it briefly here. I cover it in several other videos, but I'm going to take this side tape off so they look kind of similar. But as an example, okay, this is the UR mat, and the UR mat, there's two purposes for it. Number one, it creates a good fluid bed and there's lots of fine holes in it. So any place that you have material falling straight down with no velocity, we like to see UR mat. So we always put UR mat under our header box, okay? So we'll always start with UR mat. Then as your water starts to go, it doesn't have a lot of velocity just out of here. So sometimes what we might do is we might put a strip of Razorback. So we might put a strip of Razorback in here next, okay? So we'll put that strip of Razorback in here. Then what am I gonna do? Well, then I'll probably hit it with some scrubber. So I'm gonna go in here, and I like to flare up that little end. And so now I'm gonna put some scrubber. So now I'll put scrubber mat, and maybe what I'll do is I might even go, okay, so I've got under my header box UR, then I'm gonna maybe a strip or two of Razorback, and then I'm gonna go scrubber, scrubber, and then I'll probably put my Bedrock, because the Bedrock likes high water. Then I'd put Bedrock, then I might put some more UR in here. Now this is sort of a high banker setup. The other way to do this is to alternate it. So you can alternate it. So let's say I'm going to do UR under here, and maybe I just want to use two mats down my sluice. I'm going to start with a UR, and then I'm going to go scrubber, Bedrock, scrubber, Bedrock, scrubber, Bedrock. That's a really good way to treat it. And what happens is your lights are kind of launching. Your lights are kind of launching, and what happens is the gold is the first thing to hit this, and we find that a lot. It's kind of like the action of a gold cube almost, where that well, that velocity, a specific density well, everything drags and then it comes up, and the gold is always right there on the edge where the lights are being launched. Same thing with this scrubber mat. If you look at a scrubber, it just gently launches, and that's why it's real good at holding heavies and catching heavies. But I want to just see this real quick. So here's what I'm talking about when I talk about this is the UR mat. So I've got UR mat under my header box. Then maybe I'm going to go to, let's say, right after that, maybe just one strip of Razorback. Then I'm going to go to scrubber mat. Okay. Then I'm going to go to Bedrock. So then I've got Bedrock and work it all the way down. If you have a really long box, or if you want to mix it up, you can also take a strip of river hog. And this is what we do in our monster hog, and a lot of commercial ops are starting to do this with our mat. They're letting the water fall, the water's building velocity, and you'll see this in all your sluices. Your sluice has different velocity and water speed all the way down. So as that water starts to come down, it increases in speed. And what we do is we do a flow interruption with the river hog. We actually stop the water. It has to flip over these big ramps, and it slows down, and then it releases again. And now we send it back over the scrubber and the Bedrock or whatever combination. So if you have a long enough sluice, you can do that with the river hog. We do that a lot. We instead of just having it go down the sluice the whole way, we have it go down and stop and go. And I wish so many commercial operations would do that, even with expanded metal and miner's moss. Instead of just having the whole sluice being expanded metal and miner's moss, like a long tom, have one riffle. Have one riffle where you've changed that velocity, you stop it, slow down the water and let it start again. It's such a good way to do this. Remember, you want to have your slurry exposed to several different velocities, water speeds, capture zones, and that's why we have so many mats. Maybe it's small flat gold. Maybe the small flat gold doesn't like this river hog for some reason, just where you are. Maybe it will like the bedrock. If it doesn't like those two, maybe it likes the scrubber. So it's interesting that you offer your gold so many different areas and places to hide. At some point down that sluice, it's going to get caught. Again, always start out fast, really fast water, and then tone it down a little bit. Now, if you want to know more about what mat to use where, again, that little free prospecting guide that I have up on the website, it addresses stream sluices, dredges, and so on and so forth. But we're starting to see a lot of people use our matting in dredges where they wouldn't before, mainly because of that river hog. The other thing about it is if you have a real strong dredge, we did do a commercial grade test on fast, deep water. If you have a dredge and if you can put 1/4 inch punch plate up at the beginning of that, or a commercial grade sluice, and you can put, actually if you want, you can actually put the razorback and bedrock up under 1/4 inch punch plate, and you create a dropout zone, and that dropout zone actually has a slower, softer water under it, even though it's still quick. And man, you talk about, we were capturing a ton of gold. And it was a huge, massive, fast rocket commercial operation, but it just offered that dropout zone. It's the same thing in a dredge. If you come out and you'll have that dropout zone, and we're going to run ours this summer with about 24 inches of punch plate over the bedrock and over the razorback, and let that dropout area, everything drop out at the beginning. Once we stop that in a dredge, then we're going to go to scrubber mat and the river hog. Again, when you're in a dredge, you want a little bit of flow interruption, but I personally would not use all river hog in it. You want some kind of smoothness. You just don't want constant big riffles throwing up and mixing up that stuff. Plus, you'll have a lot of rocks behind it too. So hopefully that helped you out a little bit, but like I said, I'm going to keep those other videos up so you can see those as well too.